Hey everyone, and welcome back to Map Making 101 for Company of Heroes 3. My name is John. I'm one of the community managers on the team, and I am, of course, joined by our instructor, David. How you doing?
I'm doing good, John. How are you?
I'm great. So last time, David, you were giving us some advanced tips on prefabs and how to call playbills, and it got really, really exciting. Kind of looking at some of the possibilities that we could have in terms of pre-roll destruction and calling in units and that sort of thing. So it sounds like we're going to do something even more advanced today.
Yeah, so today what we're going to get into is creating missions. Basically, with the tools that are publicly available, I made a little single player mission here. And we'll be able to use that to just show off even more things that players will be able to do.
Okay, amazing. So we're using the map that Will created for us earlier in the series.
Yeah.
So how do we set this up correctly so that we can do this type of single player mission in our skirmish mode or in our custom games?
Right. So, with a lot of the stuff that I showed last time, so the pre-roll destruction, sort of the basic outline of the conditions and actions we went through, capturing things, setting E groups and S groups, using abilities, spawning units, all that kind of stuff. You're able to do that in both custom games, like with other players in a PvP match, and in your single player skirmish modes. When it comes to the mission objectives themselves, that has to be done in single player skirmish. That prefab is assuming that there is a local player, that local player is human, and that they are the only human, basically. Mm-hmm. So I have these other CPUs set up here basically to act as allied units that I can assign, or an allied player that I can assign units to, and then enemy players that I can assign units to as well. The other part is that you need to set it up as annihilation and as fixed locations. Basically, when it comes to creating a mission, you're going to want to think about it in the same way that we would be creating a single player mission for one of the campaigns, right? So you know where the player is going to be starting, mm-hmm. You know who you're fighting against, and you know what units or factions you are going to be using. So yeah, it's very much a like you're like if you were to make a mission and put it on the workshop, you'd want to indicate to players like you need to play as the British or as the Americans. You need to have this as your enemies. There are ways around that you could script in, but that's going to be advanced, and we'll see if we get to that. But you could definitely do checks, right? There is actually a condition where you can check the faction of what the player is, and then you could maybe have your prefabs branching out from that point. Mm-hmm. But for now, let's focus on getting a mission running. And so first, what we're going to do is we'll play through this mission, and I'll kind of show off some of the different things that I've got going on, and then we'll jump into the editor and I'll show how we accomplish that.
Okay, amazing. Let's get to it.
So this is a fixed force mission, which if you've played any of our campaigns or a lot of RTS campaigns before, you'll be familiar with. And this is a mission where you don't have a base. You don't have the ability to build up your units. You are given units at the beginning, and then you kind of have some opportunities to get more units, throughout the mission. So you can see I've disabled resources here, although I have given the player some munitions that I'll use to upgrade these partisans. This is a partisan mission as well. Mm-hmm. I kind of wanted to show off some units that you don't see that often, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so the main objective here is to kill this German officer who's kind of hopping back and forth between these buildings. Basically scripted him to get into a building, wait a little while, go to the next building. He's kind of on this little patrol route. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that scripted this little scene, like these partisans with the Panzerschrecks here have ambushed a convoy with munitions and have now pinned these guys down, but they need maybe a little bit of help.
Very cool.
So that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to, instead of going right after the officer, although you could just go kill the German officer, because this is a secondary objective, mm-hmm. We'll help these partisans first.
Yeah, and just like right off the hop, I'm really excited by some of the things that I'm seeing here because it really does look and feel like a single player mission. You know, you don't have an HQ, you just have a reinforcement truck. Like you said, you have a fixed force, you have a main objective and a side objective. I'm kind of curious, how did you, maybe what were some of your design thinking, or how did you approach this as you were kind of setting this up?
So the goal for this one was really, I don't know, variety maybe. I wanted to specifically show off some things that you wouldn't necessarily see in a typical skirmish match, right? That's why this is a fixed force, right? We're going to remove bases, we're going to remove resources. Focus on using partisans, which is like a non-factional unit. Have you going after, just a single officer and hunting him down and killing him. Just trying to show off a few different things that you might not have seen. A clear area objective where we actually paint the objective space on the ground. Having in an allied unit squad that once we actually get done with a very passive way of saying kill these Germans. They'll actually join your side. So we've got allied units, we've got enemy units. The allies are going to be switching sides. We've got a clear area objective, and we've got an assassinate objective. We've got a vehicle, patrolling around. Just trying to get a few like some variety in here in terms of what's going on.
Yeah.
So these guys are on your side now. So now you've got like a pretty decent force here in terms of your partisan units. And your partisan units have AT grenades. They've got Molotovs. You can give them the kind of the LMGs, SMGs. These guys have Panzer Shreks. Actually, I'm gonna have these guys also pick up these extra munitions that got dropped. And so, spawned in these trucks and destroyed them is something that I did through script. Having the units switch sides after you complete the objective. That's a condition that's on the objective itself. I think I can give these guys submachine guns. Normally for a mission, I would probably change, and certainly fixed force, I would probably I would reduce the size of the map and have way fewer, resource points and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to really mess with Will's map that much. We'll just kind of take this as is. But of course, when it comes to, and this kind of worked out, there's lots of nice farmland, and then more of a built up city. I felt like that kind of made sense to, partisans are starting out in the farm. They kind of ambush on this side road, and then up in the more built up city, well, that's where the Germans are a little bit more strong because they've kind of taken over this local area, right? Yeah. And so there are aspects. Oh, I'm in combat. So that narratively that kind of made sense to me. But of course, there's a lot of ways that you can approach a mission, right? Is there a mechanic or a unit that you want to show off? Is there something historically that you want to represent? Is there is there just a cool map that you kind of want to make use of in a certain way? All of those are totally valid ways to approach how you're making a mission. With this mission, I had some pretty clear goals in terms of what do I want to show off and what do I want to teach. So for this mission, I really was coming at it more mechanically. But once you do that, I wanted to make it fixed force because that's kind of I wanted to show how you don't need to start with an HQ. Well, once I say it's going to be fixed force, that kind of narrows the perspective. To me, a fixed force mission says, special forces, right? So, okay, do I want to do paratroopers or SSF? And then I was like, well, we've got partisans, right? Let's make it a partisan mission. Once you make it a partisan mission, that kind of reduces the scale in some way. That alone kind of brings up some of the narrative possibilities of what you want. I'm like, well, okay, there's a local German, commandant or whatever, right? And he's kind of the Germans have taken over this town, and now the partisans are gonna kind of rise up a bit and take it back. So now you've got them ambushing it, right? Once you kind of go down the decision tree, some of these things kind of just make sense once you've made kind of the overall decisions.
Yeah. David, I'm kind of curious. I noticed that the player has vision of some of the areas around the objective. I'm guessing that's something that you had to do manually?
Yeah, so we have a fog of war reveal thing. That's something you can kind of go back and forth a little bit, and I did actually go back and forth a little bit on whether or not I wanted to show it. That could be something where you just have you just have this icon, but you don't actually see anything here to give a little bit, to have the fog of war. You could have it so that this objective icon doesn't actually appear until you spot him. So maybe you saw there was that big clear area. I could say, the officer is in the city and you have to find him. And once you find him, then maybe you can see where it is. For the purposes of this demo, I wanted to reveal the fog of war just because I wanted to show what was happening. Although, it's totally valid in a mission to just show an objective area, right? Like maybe they just already have some idea of what's going on. There are ways you can narratively justify that. But we've got too close and we've killed too many units, so the officer may escape, right? We've got another thing showing up here. The officer escape destination is there, and we've got an escape vehicle coming up.
Oh boy, this is getting tense.
Uh-oh. So now there's a bit of time pressure here. We gotta try to get close to this officer, or he might escape. I'm gonna show him escaping because the him not escaping is me just killing these two things. But if you kill these two things, he wins. But oh no, I can't get there quick enough. Oh god, he's getting his what the heck? He's gonna get away.
He's getting away, David.
He's getting away.
I can't believe you've done this.
Oh no. Anyway, so yeah, he's gonna get away. But so yeah, that's another thing is having your objectives change over the defeat over the course of a mission, right? Like having things that surprise the player or change what's going on. That's a real sort of battlefield thing, right? Like you have a plan. The plan is to kill the officer, but is that what's going to happen? Once you get into the mission, right? No plan survives first contact with the enemy, that whole thing. So, having a mission like kind of change as it goes on is sort of, I find, interesting sometimes and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you want to sort of anticipate like, okay, what could go wrong at sort of any moment here for the player, and what actually makes it interesting if it goes wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, straightforward mission, quite simple. But there's still a bunch of different things going on there. So let's jump in and kind of check it out. And here it is in all of its glory, all of the little lines showing all of the things that are being spawned.
Okay.
So yeah, like this is kind of what your mission will end up looking like once you've got a few different things happening. Now these I just kind of let them be wherever they appeared, but you can see. Oh, we've got this. Maybe I'll kind of spread these out. So yeah, you can see this main objective has a lot of tendrils moving around the map.
Yeah, I can see what you mean now about sort of tidying things up
You want
with your
things
playbills.
to be tidy.
Yeah.
Because if they're not, it's going to be it's going to get messy. It's going to get messy really quickly. When I'm dealing with prefabs, there's a couple things that I'm going to talk about right off the bat. First thing you're going to want to do, probably just lock all of these layers. That's just so that I can. I didn't lock walls. That's just so that I can go and select things, and I'm only selecting prefab related things. I'm not trying to dodge hedges and fences and stuff just to click on all this stuff. Yeah. So let's see. There's a whole bunch of things happening here. There. So here's my little prefabs folder. We remember it from last time, and you can see here, and then it'll have your map name. I'm just going to close that. So I have a few different things here. I've got a play build that's just a couple mission setup things. I have an intro type, which is a new prefab that we haven't gone over. I have mission objectives, which is a new prefab we haven't gone over. And then I have a few more playbills that are doing some, well, specific things that help out the mission. For instance, the officer patrol logic I have in its own playbill. I have an armored car patrolling around, and that's in its own playbill. And you can kind of see, that it's pointing to it was just kind of patrolling around in a circle here. And then the officer escape logic, of course, is kind of in its own playbill. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, I think, is the intro type, because there are a couple kind of key stages that you need to go through in order to actually get the main objectives working and appearing in your mission. And that starts with the intro type. So just like before, you go and right click on your map folder, hit add, and then you would select the intro type. Once you have that, you'll open it up and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff underneath here. Most of this you can ignore. A lot of this stuff is things that we needed when we were making missions for the campaign, starting with certain buildings and having race-specific or company-specific units and that kind of stuff. You can ignore almost all of this. The camera is something that you'll want to start with. You'll notice that the camera didn't start over here where the HQ was. The camera started where I said the camera was. And so in the intro type, you can select where your starting camera is. And again, that's just by using this little marker here. Once you go into that, or once you've set that, you go on to objectives. And what you want to select is var none. That will start toggled off. You want to toggle that on. Basically what that does is it skips a lot of this and just goes right to your main objectives.
Okay.
That's what's happening. You're just needing this to start. And when that happens, like you'll see if you select this, selecting some of these toggles like creates different options within this, and that's why it can be a little confusing. But you go to objectives, you hit var none. You now have a none option here under objectives. And in the on complete, what you will do is you will launch your main objective.
Okay.
Playbill. So basically a lot of what you're doing here is you're kind of just skipping over this, but it's doing some initialization. And then you go to your main objective. Your main objective, again, you're right clicking, you're adding, and you add mission objectives. So you kind of want to add your intro type and your mission objectives, and then set your objective to var none. I'm just going to repeat it again because I know it will bear repeating. And in the on complete, launch your main objective playbill. We are now done with the intro type.
Okay.
In main objective, oh, I duplicated it by accident. In main objectives, what you're going to see is these two things. Initialize is something that will happen right away. As soon as it's launched, you can have, basically you can launch playbills in here, but we're not going to do that. We don't need that right now. And then in the objective folder, you can add objectives. I've already got one set up here, and that is objective 1, kill the officer. Now, as you can see over here, you've got your properties like we went through before. It's a lot of properties. But again, a lot of this is stuff that we were using for our campaigns. You can set all kinds of things in here. First is a display name. Now, this display name is just for the editor. The title is what will appear in the game. And you have your Lokdb that is included when you create one of these things, and you can add dialogue to it, right? So, kill the German officer, my very helpful kill hit point, the clear area, assist partisans for an officer. Like you can see all the little titles I have are included in here. And so that's where you set that. You can set what the objective type is. This is the main objective, so I have it set to primary, but you can set it to secondary or bonus. The UI template, like those are like the icons that you'll see appear in the map as well, whether it's that single star icon or that double star icon, right, indicating whether or not it's a primary or secondary. These indicate, this is going to, I got to stop. This is going to be an informationally dense video.
Okay.
Pause it, rewind it, stop it if you need to. But there's just some information I'm going to just kind of front load here that I think is going to be very useful for players who want to set up missions. But if you feel your eyes starting to roll up into the top of your head, that is an entirely natural feeling at this point as I'm going through all of this like very like minute details. But anyway, these pop-ups and title cards, that's like when you start the objective and the pop-up shows up in the middle of the screen and says, kill the objective. You can have those just not show up.
Okay.
Right? You can have objectives that are silent, right? That don't actually appear to the player, but are kind of happening behind the scenes. Sometimes that's useful for having certain other objectives. If you want it to show up at the beginning, but you don't really care if the title card shows again if the player fails. Maybe you've got too many objectives happening, and you just don't want a whole bunch of objective pop-ups happening. You can kind of do that. And then you get to the beat type. This is where you get a lot of the options here. And so you'll notice underneath over here, there's a whole bunch of folders. This beat type kind of indicates what some of those folders do. So if I select blank, you'll notice that the target folder disappears. And this is where you can do some other things. You can have a capture objective. Now your target location and everything is geared towards a capture objective or clear area or defend or whichever. Blank is honestly always an okay option because blank is just open. You just set your completion conditions and your failure conditions however you want. Right. That's if you have like a pretty like intricate or specific thing that you want. What you would do is you would probably have a different prefab handling the completion conditions, and when that's met, you would send basically a ledger or something to the completion condition and it would just complete. But in this case, it was pretty straightforward because it was just destroy, right? And the target location is an officer that I'm spawning. So I'm actually spawning the officer themselves in this target location thing.
Right. And I imagine you would have assigned that officer an S group.
The target S group. SGOBJ1 target is what that officer's name actually is.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm actually spawning him in a building hold, which is Officer Garrison 03, which is this church. So right away, I say I want the beat type to be destroy. I've set the title to kill the German officer, and I've set a target location, the target location themselves being the officer. We actually have an officer squad, which we use for single player, but in this case it makes sense. And then I'm spawning them in the church. And actually, as far as the objective itself goes, that's pretty much all you need. From what I've shown you with the intro type, the main objective, setting a target location of the officer, that is, if you kill the officer, the objective is completed. That's pretty much it. All of the rest of this is flavor. Right? And so, for instance, we do want a failure condition, right? And so the two failure conditions are, I have grabbed all the player squads and given them an S group of SG player squads, and if the group count is less than or equal, so if there are no player squads left, you fail.
Yeah.
And if the if the enemy squad gets to this, you fail. That was the escape condition, right? So player 2 unit at location is not equal to 0, meaning if there is a player 2 unit in here,
then you fail.
Okay. And if you look at this up here, so I'm going to try not to click through things very quickly. I'm going back to the root of the objective, and I'm scrolling down, and you can see down here that there are objective complete and objective fail parameters here. So I could have multiple completion conditions, and again, I could say any one of them or all of them have to be true. And in this case, the failure check is any one, right? So you can fail this objective, any one of them. So either of these are failed, the mission is failed.
Right.
I could have it so both need to be failed in order for the mission to fail. And then the fail result, you can either set it to next objective or mission fail. What that means is that, is failing this objective actually just going to completely fail the mission, or can you fail an objective and have the mission continue? That's typically what you would do for secondary conditions. And then I have an objective ID that I've set, ID obj1. Usually for IDs, you do ID underscore, whatever it is. That's so that I can, again, just like naming squads or buildings, so I can reference this objective, check on its state. You can have conditions for prefabs that are, is objective started, is objective complete, is objective failed, those kinds of things, and you'll need an ID to do that. When it comes to the other two things that are very necessary, in the on-complete, you need to have an action called multiplayer complete, because this isn't quite a single-player mission, right? It's kind of a skirmish match. And so we do multiplayer complete, player 1, and then on the mission fail, we can do multiplayer complete, player 2.
I see. Okay.
And so you're just calling those two things.
I was curious. Can we have more than one quote main objective, or do? Okay, so then I'm guessing you can sort of set those as like a number of things that you have to complete throughout the map. And how would those be different than the secondary objective folder that you have there, or are they the same?
So secondary objectives, you typically handle a little differently. If you wanted more multiplayer objectives, or main objectives, I should say, you can just duplicate it in the same way. And just like with all of our prefabs, it'll just go down the list.
Right.
So objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, objective 4. That was a lot of like very specific instructions, but that's going to save players a lot of headaches. I think it's just like, that is how if you missed a step, go back and rewatch that. Otherwise, you can kind of experiment with different B types, with different, things passing or failing. Once we get into here, this is where you have a lot of the setup for what's happening. So I've already gone through target locations, failure conditions, the on complete and on fail. So these on ones are on pre-start. That means before the title card shows up. On start means after the title card shows up, do something. On pre-complete, before the complete card pops up. On complete is whenever the objective is completed, or if the objective is failed. That's kind of like where these things happen, and you can split up your actions by those things. So of course the mission complete trigger and the mission fail triggers are happening there. And then on pre-start and on start, I have a few different things happening. So on start, on this objective, I have the player unit spawning, right? And I'm spawning 2 resistance fighters that I have named SG player squads. And this spawn squads action is just like with the other play bills and stuff. Once you see this actions folder, you can call any of the actions that we normally would. I have it just housed inside the main objective, mostly just for organization purposes. I could call another prefab where I'm spawning things, but just for the sake of sanity, as much as you can, if it can just be in the pre-start, just put it in the pre-start, or not the pre-start, but in the pre-start, on start, complete, on complete. Like, keep it within the objective as much as you can, because that's just going to save you a headache later. The reason why you wouldn't just have it in the main objective is if you wanted to add conditions that were not just, is it the pre-start, start, complete, or on complete, or on fail of this mission. So I don't care when I spawn these. I want them to spawn right as the objective starts. So it's totally fine for them to be here. The other thing that I want there right at the beginning is the enemies. And so that's actually what a lot of these actions that you're seeing here, all these lines, that's actually just where I'm spawning all these enemies. And again, they can just be there from the very beginning, and so it doesn't They don't need a condition. I just want them to spawn right away. What I'm doing here is I'm setting them to be a solo squad. That's a new thing that we didn't go over. Previously, we were doing AI locked. So having neither of these selected, the skirmish AI will take over. So it will try to it will try to capture points. It will attack you if it sees you, that kind of thing. AI locked, it will do nothing. It will, it will stand there. If an enemy unit comes within range, they'll shoot at it.
Right.
But it will otherwise do nothing. Solo squad basically creates a very small AI prefab. So this guy, he'll stay in this area. He won't be completely stationary, and he won't really leave this area or go try to capture things, but he'll take cover. If this cover gets destroyed, he'll move and try to get to a different place in cover. It's just a quick little built-in way to have them. You don't want them moving around and running around everywhere, but you do want them to have a little bit of life. You want them finding cover. You want them doing things. So instead of having to script, hey, find this cover. If this cover is destroyed, go find another cover. You can just select solo squad, and they'll operate within a small area.
Right.
And they'll if they have the ability to, they'll use abilities. They'll do that kind of stuff. They'll basically defend this little zone.
Okay, and that prevents them from running off and treating it like a skirmish.
Like
or
a skirmish, exactly.
Game. Yeah. Okay.
The armored car, I have spawned AI locked because I am actually scripting them to go to certain locations. Right. I scripted just a very simple little patrol beat, which we'll get to. And so anyway, that is all happening on the pre-start. So as soon as this objective starts, boom, that's all going. Once the objective starts, I'm doing some other things. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm locking this officer because, again, I have him doing specific things. He's entering garrisons, he's exiting garrisons, he's going around. And one of the quirks of this setting a target thing doesn't actually give you all of the same options that spawning a squad does. So I am grabbing this officer and I'm locking him. And AI lock squads is just one of the actions that you can call. The next thing I'm doing is I'm launching the secondary objective. So we talked about last time how if you don't have these things start immediate, you need to call them. So I am launching the secondary objective. I'm launching the patrol logic. I'm launching the officer escape. Basically, I'm launching all of these other prefabs that I wanted to launch. I need to launch them separately because they are all housing a lot of separate conditions and actions that I need to be handling separately from just has the objective begun. And then the last thing I'm doing is actually just another action, and this is where I'm revealing the fog of war. So in this case, I'm just revealing the position. The radius is just at a radius of 15. And yeah, that works. Also, I did a very silly thing. I don't know why I wrote 999. If you want it to go forever, you just do -1.
Oh, okay. Right.
It defaults to 0. I go -1. Don't do 999. I was like, last forever.
Okay.
I just really don't want players to be confused by my little mistake there. Go -1 if you want it to last forever. But if you want it to maybe you just do want to reveal it at the very beginning of the map. Well, okay, let's say we'll just reveal it for 60 seconds, right? You just put whatever number in there that you want.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's all happening in the OnComplete, and that's the main objective. That everything that is happening there is done. The main objectives are actually usually pretty straightforward. They are where you set up exactly what the objective is in terms of like what you are, in this case, what you're going to kill, how you can fail. And then from that point on, you're kind of launching other things. Like the main objective is where you start other things from. And so let's get into the secondary objective. Now, the secondary objective, this is a playbill, but the playbill that I'm calling in the actions, first thing I'm doing is I'm waiting 10 seconds. So even though it starts right away from when the main objective starts, it calls this, I have it waiting. Now, something I wanted to do here with everybody is change that, because I think waiting 10 seconds, 10 seconds wasn't enough time. Like you're still just kind of like looking around and getting your bearings here
Yeah.
before suddenly you've got, you've got another objective now. And also, what if you don't want to do this right away? Like your first objective is kill the officer, but you didn't really get an opportunity as a player to like decide whether or not you did want to kill the officer. You know, it was just immediately like, oh, you've got another objective. And when it comes to secondary objectives and stuff, you kind of want to reward the player a little bit for, you know, walking around and exploring, kind of
Right.
like discovering another thing. So instead of waiting 10 seconds, let's just delete that. Let's add a condition. And I think we're going to do the classic unit at location. I'm going to set it to not equal 0. And I'm going to set that position here. I'll set that radius to, it's probably got to be a little bit wider. It's probably got to be like 50 or something. Because you kind of want it like outside of the player's like sight range.
Right.
Actually, it might need to be a little bit longer even. We'll do 75. And then what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm actually going to move it a little further away, because like it's right in front of the player spawn. Yeah, I think that this is actually pretty close to the player. I think it could be a little further away. Especially because, you know, I said I don't want it to start right away, but the edge of where this is where the player spawns right here, and then this edge is where it'll be discovered. So I'm gonna move it a little further away. The really nice thing about this is that I can kind of just select all of these things and just move it. Now this objective is over here, which makes it really simple. Actually, because Will made all of these very helpful square fields, everything's pretty much in the same position. Even these are the two partisans that were spawned. They're still on the fence. These guys are still in the middle. We've got these are the two trucks and stuff, and these are the enemy Germans. I don't have some magical sight. I just know this because I set it up. But yeah, the only other thing I'll grab though is these. I can't grab them. Can't grab them because they're in a layer that I locked. So I'll unlock that quickly. These kind of over here. There we go. That's sort of where they were. And I'll lock that again.
Okay, so basically what we're trying to do here is just give the player more time to explore,
Yeah,
get to this engagement, and as soon as they get close, then that's when they unlock that objective.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so the player now starts here. They'd have to kind of like go all the way over here in order to engage this. And once they kind of cross this line, this objective will start. We could add another condition. If we really wanted to like make sure this happened, we could just duplicate this condition and set it over here, basically just to capture it. So if the player, it won't start right away, but if the player moves either this way or up here, it'll start. And then of course we would set our conditions to any one. So if the player goes in any one of these areas, they'll
Okay.
find that. But we're gonna let this be a discovery, right? Either the mission is just go kill the officer, and you can figure that out, and you can just kind of walk right up this main road and try to go get him. But if you try to, flank or go around, you'll discover this secondary objective, and then by killing these guys, you'll get 2 more units to help you out.
Right.
And that's typically what you want in a secondary objective. Like you have your main objective, which is the completion is required for completing the mission. A secondary objective should be something where the completion helps you complete the main mission or main objective, right? And so you do this, the reward is you get 2 more resistance fighters. So you go from having 2 squads to 4 squads. That helps you kill the officer.
Right.
So now that we've kind of set this condition up like a little bit separately and kind of balanced this based on some play testing. I thought it made sense here, but when we play tested it, it didn't really make sense for it to be so close. So we're going to move it away. So now we're going to call an action, and the action is create dynamic objective. And the reason we're doing that over here, oh, sorry, I'll collapse some of these. The reason we're doing that over here is specifically because we want it to start based on a condition, rather than just being a part of one of the main objectives. But once you do that, you have all of the same options that you did with the main objective. You can see that you get to select your beat type. In this case, I went with clear area, so I selected this little circular area and put it around these Germans. Once there are no enemies within that area, you've completed the objective, because that's what you're trying to do to kill them. I've set the title to assist partisans. I've set the objective type in the UI data template to secondary. And there is a failure condition technically, but I'll get into why that's a technically. But basically, I grabbed these two partisans, put them in an S group, and set that to 0. And basically, this objective is failed. It's passed if you kill the Germans. It's failed if the partisans die.
Right, I see.
Because the objective is to assist them. And so when you set that clear objective, the area location, that ends up, instead of a target location, you have an area location. So that's just what I've set up here, is this little area. So now we've got a UI callout. Actually, I don't think I went over a UI callout with the main objective. The main objective also has a UI callout. You saw there's the kill marker over top of the officer. This UI callout is how you have those icons appear on the minimap and in the world.
Okay, I see.
And so this UI callout, it's going to start immediately. The target is a marker, so I'm just putting a marker right in the center of here. The text for that is clear area. I'm going to tell the player exactly what they need to do in here. And the UI template I had set to primary. Players might have noticed if they go back and watch that this secondary had a primary thing. I'm going to set that to secondary because that's a bug. And then
It fixed it live on the video.
Yeah, so now it will properly indicate on the minimap and in the world that this is a secondary objective with that double star icon, and use a world arrow. So these are options here. So you can, I do want a world arrow because I do want it showing in the world where this is happening. I don't think I need a minimap blip area. Basically, that would indicate a radius on the minimap. I think that would make the minimap a little bit too busy, and the area is small enough that I don't believe you'd see it anyway. It might be like, for instance, if I wanted to say, if I wanted to break down this main objective into find the officer and then kill the officer, I might use a minimap blip area and say, and kind of indicate this town and say, search this area for the officer, and that would show that off.
And do that instead of like the objective marker above the officer
above the officer's head. And then when you find the officer, I would switch it to kill at hovering above his head.
Yep.
I do, however, want to show what the area is when they get to this location physically in the world, what that is. And that's where you add a ground reticle. So that's where that circle was actually painted on the ground, and this is where you set the radius of that ground reticle. So if I set it to 15, it'll be smaller, but you typically want to have it as, you want to have this be the same as the area that you're trying to clear.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So then on pre-start, just like before, I want these units all spawning as the objective starts. They're not needed before then, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm spawning these 3 grenadiers. I'm spawning them locked because I don't want them going anywhere, but they are within range of these guys, so they were shooting and stuff. And then I spawned this truck, and I spawned this truck. You saw them as burning hulks, and that's because I gave them S groups, and then I used an action called group kill right away. So I spawn them, and then I kill them, and then that's why they end up being
as hulks,
wrecked hulks here.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of setting up the little scene is what's happening here. And then
and for those grenadiers, if you had given them the same logic that the enemies in the city have, so that they're not
Where they're
static.
finding locations.
Yeah, so if you had set them that way, I guess the risk would be, what if they move slightly outside the
What if they
object-
kind of move outside the
Right.
area you really want them to be
Right.
in? Because they will, like they will have some amount of self-preservation, right?
Right.
And so if they start to leave, they might leave the area. That's how you're going to get weird little edge cases and bugs and stuff. And you can script around that, certainly. And probably, this is, in general, this is probably what we would call like a V1 of a mission. And so in some cases, it's not about being fancy. It's about showing what the mission is going to be, right? Getting the kind of broad strokes and the point across. It might be that, in a V2 or V3, I do want these people doing a little bit more movement, maybe actually moving to like, different areas as their fight kind of increases or is being won or lost. And it would just be more conditions and more actions and checking all those things, like, what's the health that they've got, what location are they at, moving to different locations, that sort of thing. In this case, though, just because I do want this to be a little bit of an easier engagement, I've done something here. First, I'm spawning the two resistance fighters. I upgraded one of them because you have this upgrade PBG here where you can give them things. I gave them a Panzerschreck, again, kind of playing into they ambushed this little convoy. And also, I want to give the player a Panzerschreck because there's an armored car in the city.
Right.
And so you have AT grenades. So if you do just go right into the city, you have the ability to take out an armored car with AT grenades. But if you go over to this area, not only do you get 2 more units, but one of them has a Panzerschreck, and that's a big power spike for you. So like you really want the reward for completing this to like be noticeable and feel really good.
I did also notice that if you upgrade your original 2 partisans, you don't have the munitions for like grenades.
Yeah.
So
And so also the other reward is, again, it's all of these munitions and stuff. So you're by completing this secondary, you're definitely like gearing yourself up to do way better in the city itself. But I do 2 things. I apply modifiers. That's another action. So I grab the entities in the S group, and when it comes to apply modifier, there's actually a bunch of options all packaged into your E group. You can do a player, you can do S squads in an S group, you can do entities in S group. In this case, we're doing entities because we're going to do a received damage modifier, and I am multiplying it by 0.1. So they receive 10% of the damage that they are actually dealt.
right.
And then I mod their weapon damage. So they deal 1% of the damage that they normally do.
Oh, I see.
That's
Okay.
so basically this is kind of a diorama, right? It's a scene. They're fighting each other, yes, but I really want the player to be the one who comes in and kind of saves the day.
Right. They're just shooting blanks at each other for now.
Effectively, yeah. Now this is something that like this is what I would use. So that's why I said technically you can fail this. Basically, you can use mods like this to slow the fight down. So it could still fail, but the player still has an opportunity to actually come in and either succeed or, fail because they just, didn't get there in time. And we actually, we do that in a lot of missions. We're kind of like quietly changing some of it. Certainly when it's allies and enemies fighting, we're kind of changing their stats a little bit so that it's the player who can be the one who comes in.
Right.
Not all the time, but in like specific occasions, we kind of do that.
Right.
And so if I wanted to, because if we just let the 3 grenadiers and 2 partisans fight each other, well, one of them is going to win or lose pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Kind of before the player really has an opportunity to engage with this. So we slow the fight down a little bit. And then on complete, once this is complete, I have created a new little set of actions here called Grant Partisans. So I use the set owner action. I grab the partisan S group and I just set the target player to 1. So it's given to them, and then I remove the weapon these two modifiers. You'll see if I go up to here, I set a modifier ID.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to do that, but if you ever think that you're going to want to remove that modifier later, you need to give it an ID.
Okay.
Because now I've removed that. So when the player gets it, they're not dealing no damage and receiving no damage.
Yeah, I was going to ask how we turn that off. Okay, that's good to know.
So the player gets them, and then I remove their mods, and now they're just player units.
Okay.
And so that in a nutshell is the secondary objective. Let's talk about some of these other ones. Let's talk about the armored car, actually, because this is a very simple one and kind of shows you how you can just like stack actions to do stuff. Now you can do a waypoint path, which is something you would set up here. Basically, it's a spline, and I could have set this spline up, a line effectively that the armored car would follow. But I just kind of wanted to very simply, quickly do it with actions again, just to really like hammer home the use of actions here. And so this armored car patrol, I've got 4 of these playbills lined up, and they're all pretty much the same. I check if the unit is at the location, and I'm filtering this time by the armored car. So it's not just player 2, but I'm also specifically asking if it is the armored car at the location. Mm-hmm. That's important because there are these units that are wandering around. And the odds of them wandering directly into this is low, but it's not 0. And so I'm kind of preventing an edge case here, what we would call an edge case. Because again, I'm not completely locking these guys. I am allowing them to wander a little bit. And so just to make sure that one of these guys doesn't inadvertently wander into this area, I am filtering to make sure it is specifically the armored car that is the location. And then I use attack move to this position. Mm-hmm. And then it goes down to the next thing. And it checks if the unit is at this position. And if it is, I send it to this position. The next one checks if it's at this position. If it is, I send it to this position. And again, we check to see once this guy gets here, we move back to the final one, and then we use the action called loop. It will then go back to the first one and continue going through those actions.
Okay, so basically using loop in any sort of playbill like that will just continuously
it'll just send it
start to end.
It'll just send it right back to the first one. Well, actually, you set the stage. So I could have it loop on the third one. So it'll loop and go to the third one, and then loop and then go to the third one, and the first few won't happen.
Oh, okay.
So you could have it where you have like a playbill where
it enters the map.
I decided to spawn it. I add a bunch of modifiers, all that kind of stuff, and then I start the movement ones.
Right.
And so I could loop from only the second one down, because the first one is where I've done a bunch of just setup stuff, and then it only loops on from there.
Okay.
In this case, though, I spawned it right at the beginning here because it can just sit there. I gave it its armed car name, and so this is just like before. It just goes through from top to bottom, checking the location. If it's at the location, move. And then once it gets to the bottom, we loop again.
Okay.
It's a very simple, straightforward way to kind of just put together a little patrol path.
Okay. And I know you were doing this with actions, but would this be easier with a spline, or would it just sort of be different in terms of how you set it up?
It would just kind of be different.
Okay.
It's not really easier or harder. I just really wanted to use, we talked about, objectives behind this. I really wanted to use this as an opportunity to just like reinforce how these actions, they play in a row, and you can just restart them again.
Cool.
There is an action, I believe it's literally just called like waypoint path. And you would call the path, and you would call the unit that you want on the path, and they'll just go along that path.
Okay.
And of course, I have it attack moving, not moving, so it will stop and attack the player if it sees the player. Mm-hmm. The officer patrol logic is a little different, and this is something that I would do using actions rather than a patrol path. I could have had the officer walking around outside, but just because he's a single squad, I kind of wanted him to go in the buildings a little bit. So I have him spawning. Remember, if you go all the way back to the very beginning here, this target location, he's spawning in a building hold, which I went through and I named this building, and this building Officer Garrison 1, 2, and 3. And so, again, we have our conditions and actions. I'm basically asking, is the officer in the church? If he's in the church, he's going to sit in it for 15 seconds, and then he's going to ungarrison, which is, again, we just have a garrison action, and the garrison or ungarrison is just, if it's toggled, you're garrisoning. If it's untoggled, you're ungarrisoning.
Okay.
And we do actually, if you click on these, this is something worth talking about. If you click on these titles, we do actually have very brief little descriptions over here.
Good
So
to
if
know.
enabled, garrison. Otherwise, ungarrison. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to toggles, but yeah. And then I call garrison, and I specify the next building, and the target S group is like who I want to move, and the garrison is where I want them to move. So I'm actually not giving them movement orders.
Right, you're just
I'm just
telling them-
telling them to
yeah.
garrison, and they just go to the place in garrison.
Okay. So I guess you need to, though, ensure that, like, okay, you do have a clear path to actually go and do
Yeah.
that. You're not blocked somehow, or the terrain is impassable, or
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. And then I check if they're in the next building. Once they are, again, I have them wait, then I have them ungarrison, then I have them do the next thing. Then again, check if they're in the final building, wait, ungarrison, garrison, and then again, I have it looped to the top, and they're right there.
Okay.
I could have them. Initially, what I wanted to have happen is I wanted to have them, whatever building they were in when you approached, they would stay in that building.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to, they would kind of be protected from you.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know, I wanted to add it. Basically, you just throw a bunch of Molotovs on the building and run away. So I wanted to add a little bit of urgency, and that is where the idea of the officer escaping. And that's kind of in my head. I was like, well, in the mission, at the beginning, we tell you what you're supposed to do. You go and kill the officer, and then you just go do that. And the mission doesn't really change or evolve or kind of develop as you go on. And so I wanted to do something a little bit different. And that's where the officer escape logic came in. I was like, we have this, I have it happening on this, that Will made this great kind of main road that crosses right through the town. Mm-hmm. The main church building is right there, and I already kind of picked out this church building as a central location for him to be patrolling around. I was like, what if we sweep through here and have a something actually pick them up and get away? And so I have another little playbill that I'm waiting for. So the conditions. There's two conditions here. One of which is the officer near the church? So this is kind of how I'm making sure that the officer isn't in a garrison. So the officer will actually continue doing his patrol logic until he hits inside, I'll kind of wiggle it again, this circle. Mm-hmm. So this is how I'm checking that he's not in either of these garrisons. The other thing is I want to make sure that the player has got close enough, right? So once the player is kind of in this area, by this point they will have been engaging some of these grenadiers.
Yeah.
My assumption and my head narrative for this is the officer is hearing gunshots, people are shouting, that sort of a thing. So he kind of knows something is amiss. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stop prefab or playfill.
Sorry, just about that last condition.
Yeah.
What happens if the officer is in a garrison? Because I think it checks if you're nearby. So
This
basically
will keep playing until he's not.
Okay.
That basically he'll get out and he'll walk in here. If he's in this garrison, it's when he steps out.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess because he's only in each one for 15 seconds, I believe. So that's kind of the window that you have.
There could be a little window where you could kind of sneak, get close enough to him or find
Right.
him out on the wings.
Okay.
Right, and try to close in. Otherwise, when he's really in the middle there. So there is a little bit of play there. There is some, you maybe you try to sneak around and come in this way and catch him when he's like further away or whatever. But in this case, if he's close enough to here, he'll go here. So the first thing we do is we stop a prefab or playbill. This is just the inverse of launch prefab or playbill that we've been using a bunch. It stops this patrol logic. So he will now no longer attempt to move there. I move the officer to the church. So I don't know if I kind of zoomed in, but I actually have him waiting outside right here.
Okay.
I could have had him wait in the church. That's a matter of taste.
Yeah, I mean, you check your app. You know your car is close by.
Yeah.
Your driver's almost there. You're going to go outside, right?
My Uber's waiting. I just need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's waiting outside. Half track said it was only 5 minutes away. So yeah. And then I spawn the escape vehicle. Now I'm spawning him back here. So that he'll tend to follow along this road, and then he'll go up. And I mod the vehicle speed. I actually make the vehicle move a little slower. This is where you can play around with how much time you want to give the player to intercept. Because I did it one time, and it's a half track on a road, so it just ripped up there, picked him up and left. And I was like, okay, bye, I guess. So I did reduce this speed a little bit. You could reduce it even more if you felt like you really want to give the player the opportunity to intercept the half track. And then I launch an escape, a new objective called Prevent Officer Escape. And that's where I add in. So this is, again, another dynamic objective that I'm calling. And I'm basically just using it for these UI callouts. I wanted to have something that appeared on screen for the player. Sorry. Call that a bonus objective. I wanted something to appear on screen for the player, like prevent the officer escape. And so that's kind of what I'm using this objective for. Nothing else is really happening in this objective. I'm just using it for the UI callouts because I really want to make sure that the player understands that the mission has changed.
Right.
Like you are not just trying to kill this guy, and he's not just waiting there for you. He might get away. So we stop the patrol, we move the officer into his waiting position, we spawn the escape vehicle, we mod the escape vehicle, we launch all of the warnings for the player, and then we wait. And what we're waiting for is this is the destination location for the vehicle that I said, and once that vehicle is here, and again, we're using a unit at location is not equal to 0. I'm specifying the escape vehicle itself. Again, we don't want some other random enemy getting here.
Yep.
I call the garrison, and garrison is how you get units in vehicle holds as well, not just buildings. And so instead of E group, the hold type is now an S group, and I am specifying the half track that I called, and this unit, and then I wait for 5 seconds because again, I kind of want the player to have like a little, it's loading in. And again, this is a number that you can play with.
Yep.
How much do you want to let the player be able to wait? And then once we do a check called is garrisoned, basically just is somebody inside that half track? If there is, move the truck. And then the truck again moves out to this area here. And once they enter this area, that goes all the way back to the top for our failure condition, which is that is there a player 2 unit at this location?
Yeah.
And actually, this is far enough out of the way, and I know these units won't move out there, so it's pretty safe. But in the mindset of preventing edge cases and making sure things are acting exactly the way we want, just like with those previous things, I'm going to add the S group filter to make sure only if the escape vehicle gets to this location does the mission fail.
Okay.
There probably isn't a case where one of these guys would wander all the way over here and accidentally have the mission fail, without us without the escape vehicle getting there. But there's no reason to leave it up to chance. I know exactly what the fail condition should be, so I'm going to add that to this fail condition. That was a lot of talking. That was a lot of information.
Yeah.
But that is the quick and dirty of how to make a mission.
Okay.
Basically, you can set up, your mission objectives, which themselves are pretty straightforward. Like the actual like what you're doing to pass or fail a mission can be very simple. Like I'm calling out a single entity, and if that entity dies, you win. That's the mission. Everything else is just me kind of thinking what would be cool.
Right.
Right? And the rest of it is all flavor. This secondary objective doesn't have to happen. We don't have to have enemies patrolling. We can just, in fact, the very first thing I did when I was building this mission, I set up this objective, I set up a target, I spawned one partisan, and I walked him over and killed him just to make sure it worked. Right? Very first thing I did is I said, this is a target. When he dies, you win the mission. And then I killed him. And that was it. And everything else is, well, okay, there needs to be some guys defending him. So I spawned a bunch of guys. And I was like, well, we've got this like very clear road here. And, it would be nice to have a patrol. And actually, initially, I had an infantry patrol. But I was like, oh, well, this would be a good time to add a vehicle, right? Like we want to add a little bit of a power spike. So I added a vehicle instead. And then I thought, well, if there's a vehicle, I need to give them some more anti-vehicle stuff. And so first I just spawned them with a Panzerschreck, and I'm like, well, no, let's do something else here. Like there needs to be some other reason, like a reason for you to explore these farms. Like these farms are cool out here. I keep pointing it out, but this is a nice little map that Will made. And so no, let's give the player like kind of a reason to explore this area and maybe kind of like flank around this, because of course if they come from this direction, they're actually in a good position to intercept that thing, right? And so those are kinds of things you need to think about as well. Like instead of spawning it on this side and having it come this way, that would actually be the easier way of doing it, because the vehicle is naturally coming towards the player rather than being in a position to be intercepted by the player and then escaping away. That's actually the harder version of that.
Right.
But yeah, let's add in a nice little vignette here, add a little bit of extra action, another engagement here, and then, before the player gets in here. It's all pretty, once you kind of see how it's all laid out, it's pretty much we're launching these playbills, and we're just checking conditions top to bottom.
Yeah.
And when you do the thing, launch the action I want you to. When the player is at a location, when an enemy is at a location, when a certain unit has died or not died, do the next thing. That's a lot of what we're just checking here.
Right. So David, now that you've made us all a little mini mission designers in our own right, are there any sort of common pitfalls? I know we talked about this with playbills, and you were talking about, make sure you're checking immediate or not, depending on what you want to do. What are sort of the common pitfalls when we start designing our own little mini missions like this?
Yeah, I got to tell you, not calling something correctly is a big one. But making sure you're naming things in a way. This is, like I said, so that was a pretty small mission. I think it only took somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to play it, and we were kind of talking while we were doing it, right? And so this is a pretty short mission, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things going on here.
Yeah.
If you decide to make, so you will maybe remember, anybody who's played through our campaign, that some of those missions are longer and have a lot more going on.
Yeah.
You can have many, 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 many playbills naming things properly and coming up with your own kind of naming convention that makes sense to you is really important. One of the things you'll see in this, like the drop down menus for when you're in objectives and stuff are populated, which is a nice thing, with all of the playbills you have. There will come a point where this list has a scroll bar.
Right. Yeah.
And you're going to want to name things in a way. So for instance, if I have, I actually kind of did it here, and this is out of habit. I just all caps spawn That's what those two things do. They spawn units. Call them spawn.
Yep.
Spawn what you're spawning or where you're spawning them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because you just at a glance when you have all of these, like if I, even as simple as this is, what if I just expand all of this?
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
You can start to see that it, like there's a lot, like naming things. And even here, I got a little bit lazy. I didn't name that. Right. So now what I have to say, oh, what does that do? I have to click on it.
Right.
Wait 5. That's what that does, right? Otherwise, if I get to a section where there's an action and I didn't name it, I got to click on it, look to see what it does, and then go back. You really want to make sure that you are naming things in a way. I'm checking a unit location, right? And contextually, from the title and what I'm saying you're doing, I can at a glance I can see what's happening here, right? That's going to be a big part of what you want to do. Is you want to name things sensibly, and you can just describe what it does. Launch Armored Car Patrol Logic, and you'll notice I use the word launch because that is what I'm doing. I am launching another playbill.
Right.
Right. Start with the word that you start with the thing you are doing, and then a descriptor of what you're doing or where it's happening. That's just generally a good practice. Oh my goodness, I didn't talk about one of the very, very important things. Disabling resources and making it actually a fixed force,
Oh yeah, that's probably important.
which I put in this conveniently named mission setup playbill. It's pretty straightforward. There's an action called resource disable. Specify the player you want to disable resources for.
Okay.
That's it. However, usually you'll have a little bit of resources because you start gaining resources almost immediately. And so even though I've disabled the resources, there is a few seconds where the player is gaining resources. So I actually have another thing called player set resource. You can select the type. You can set the math operation, so you can add or you can multiply or you can just set. And this is how I give the player 150 munitions right off the bat. I give them some munitions because the 2 partisan upgrades are 75 each, so you can do 2 upgrades.
Yep.
Or throw a bunch of grenades.
Right. Yeah.
I set the manpower to 0 and I set the fuel to 0.
Okay.
And that's just for cleanup.
Yep.
Right? That's also important because you'll notice that the battle groups are still on the side there. If you have no resources, you're not really going to be able to do anything with those battle groups, which is kind of the intent of this. I really want you to just be using the partisans, and so if you're not going to disable those battle groups, that's there. There is also an action that allows you to remove or lock abilities.
Okay.
The thing is, and this is an unfortunately tedious thing, you can't disable a battle group. You have to go in and disable every single ability.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
That's why I didn't do it for this one,
fair enough.
because I kind of wanted to get this created for players as quickly as possible. So you can do it, and like players would still be able to like kind of click there and select it. It just wouldn't do anything.
Okay.
That's all. So if you really want to be like, no, like this is my design.
Yeah.
And and be like, no, I want the player to use just the units that they're given, because I'm trying to create this, in this case, this specific partisan thing. You'd probably want to go through and make sure that you've disabled those abilities. In this case, it's all right because I've also disabled resources and given you 0. But then also when you're doing stuff like that, you want to make sure that you are putting pickups and stuff or granting resources and stuff along the way.
Right.
Because this is you want to do 0 resources, not because you actually want them to have 0 resources, because this is a difficult game to play with no resources. It's just so that you can control exactly when and how the player gets those resources. Yeah.
How do we disable the HQ?
You disable the HQ by just selecting a different starting position. Will probably showed you that you have these starting positions. Select starting position, no HQ.
Okay.
That's it. All right. You just set it to that. I also added another thing. Starting position, SP, rally. You'll notice that there's this little truck sitting here. It's a completely uncontrollable truck It just sits there. You'll probably recognize them from some of our single player missions. It acts as a rally point and a heal point and a reinforce point.
Right.
So you do, as the partisans, have a place you can fall back to and reinforce, or heal at least. But we're not giving you access to a full base, and that's kind of what you would do in this case. Is you would just set starting position SP rally.
Yeah.
And that's how you get that.
Okay.
And again, I want the player to have more munitions as they go through, and so I just physically placed these munitions crates kind of around where I knew these trucks were going to be destroyed. Yeah, like I said before, you probably certainly for a mission like this, you would want to adjust your territory layout and probably paint a lot of the map down here and out here isn't relevant, and so you'd want to paint that to be impassable or non-interactive. I mean, again, in this case, I didn't want to go through and completely jumble up Will's map with all these nicely painted territories, so I didn't do that. But yeah, that is the quick and dirty on how to make a mission. I know that was a lot. Just a lot of talking and a lot of me clicking on things. So pause, rewind, join the Discord is the next thing I was going to say. There is a mod chat there and a map making chat. Actually, is kind of where a lot of the prefab conversation is happening. There are people in there who have already started playing around with this. I also go in there occasionally. I see people asking questions about things. How do I do this? Or this isn't working. Just ask. We don't work in a vacuum here at Relic, right? I'm surrounded by designers when I'm making missions and stuff, and I ask them questions. And I ask for their feedback, and I ask their opinions on things. And so, don't feel like you have to do that either. Jump into the Discord, and if you have an idea about something or you're not quite sure how to accomplish something, post in there. Ask the questions. People are more than happy to help out, or just to give feedback or anything.
Yeah, of course. And as always, we're going to be linking the Modding Knowledge Center in the video description as well. And again, you can find this map on the workshop when these videos go out. And like David said, jump into the Discord so you can chat with other folks or leave some questions on this video as well, and we'll try and answer what we can. But David, any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Just that I'm kind of excited. I hope this is something that is the players latch onto. I would love nothing more than to see a Steam workshop with a whole bunch of single player missions or maps with fun scripted stuff in them. I'm gonna play them, if they're out there. So yeah, I hope that this is enough information to go on. Like I said, there's so much room for you to be creative, and there's still so many actions and conditions that I haven't gone over. The purpose of this was to try to show you where this stuff lives and give you enough information to start experimenting on your own. But yeah, I don't know. This is I hope this is enough for players to go on. And if it's not, like we said, join the Discord, ask some questions. There's a lot more information to be found.
Sounds good. So David, I think that's going to be it for our map making series for now. So a huge thank you to both you and Will for walking us through all of this. And I think maybe a few months from now, maybe in the new year, we'll maybe do a review of some of the workshop items that we see come out as a result of some of these tutorials. So maybe stay tuned for that. A little bit of a teaser. So thanks so much, David, and thank you to everyone that's watching, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.